Coming up on CTV News tonight, we look back on the developments that Canterbury's made 6 months on from the devastating earthquake. Welcome to CTV News, I'm Rob Cope-Williams. It's been 6 months since February's big earthquake that claimed 181 lives. Emily Cooper looks back at how far Christchurch has come and all the major developments.
New Zealand's second largest city was almost completely destroyed in February's earthquake. The city suffered extreme damage, and to this day the CBD still remains a red zone. Much of the city's infrastructure has been destroyed, including major landmarks. The leaning Grand Chancellor Hotel has left a shadow over the city, but in May it was announced it will be deconstructed over a period of 10 months to help preserve buildings around it.
As you'll know, the Grand Chancellor has suffered significant damage. It's the tallest building in Christchurch and it's been leaning over the buildings in its surround for quite some time. And I guess in many ways it's become a sort of a psychological point for people to look at to see the sort of damage that we have in the city. It can be seen from many parts of the city, but perhaps not for too much longer. Today we are able to announce that the arrangements for its demolition are coming to fruition, that Fletcher Construction have been designated the preferred contractor and that a process for that demolition will begin very shortly.
The Crown Plaza also last week joined the Grand Chancellor on the demolition list, along with the Copthorne on Durham Street the week before. Hospitality has taken a huge hit from February's quake. It's also been announced that the Town Hall's future is uncertain and the Convention Centre will also be demolished.
It's not safe for people to enter the Convention Centre to do full assessments. Our engineers are recommending its demolition. We are currently discussing with our insurers a way towards a shared outcome on that matter, and we hope to have further information in that regard in the next couple of months. The side of the Convention Centre which is nearest to Peterborough Street is the one which has suffered most of the liquefaction damage. The side which is on Kilmore Street is around about 100 millimetres towards the river.
At the start of this month it was announced that all stands at AMI Stadium had suffered serious damage, leaving questions around the stadium's future. However, the Hadley stand will have to be completely demolished.
The complex as a whole, we are not yet in a position to say whether or not the entire thing can or will be rebuilt. What we can say for sure at this stage is that the Hadley stand, our engineers have recommended its demolition. We are still discussing that with our insurers, but we are moving closer to a shared understanding of that matter.
This means the decision has been made that rugby will not be played at the stadium in 2012. Another blow for Canterbury rugby.
The other thing that we need to acknowledge publicly is that we have now reached a position where, with regret, we are saying that we will not be playing rugby here on this ground in 2012. It's obviously very disappointing. We have worked hard to see if we can find a way through this. In simple terms, we can't for next year.
We, the Crusaders, will not be able to play in Christchurch without some help. This is bigger than we can solve by ourselves.
Due to the damage at AMI, all World Cup rugby games for Christchurch were cancelled and moved elsewhere around the country. But the Christchurch City Council set up a temporary events village in Hagley Park, including a fan zone area for rugby fans.
Well, the temporary events village in North Hagley Park is another big step forward for us as a city. We've now got a venue where all those great events that are such a part of the social fabric of the city, the commercial fabric of the city, the entertainment fabric of the city can have a hub. So we needed something for Rugby World Cup. So we thought, right, North Hagley Park is the place to put our Rugby World Cup fan zone. So we're building a rugby field, putting in stands, giant screens, we've got a big dome, the ruck. But because that infrastructure is such good quality, we're also reusing that site for things like the Arts Festival, for the buskers, for the sort of family festival, Kids Fest, for all sorts of great events over the coming months. There'll be a bar there and entertainment areas. They'll be open all of the time. There is a need in the central city for a place to go and be entertained and have some fun. We just brought it all together. And putting it in North Hagley Park is great because it's open, people feel safe there, it's got a history of great events, so everybody knows where it is. And it's just another step in life returning inside the 4 avenues of Christchurch.
One of the first major buildings to reopen in the city was the HSBC Tower, new home to the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority. We spoke to engineers at the opening about how important high-rise buildings like this one are for the rebuild of Christchurch.
I think it's extremely important. Christchurch is New Zealand's second largest city. It's a major hub of commerce. It's a major city in sort of every way. And a city of this size needs, I believe, needs a cohesive city centre and a commercially sort of active city centre, and high-rise buildings are part of that for a city of this size. From a life safety point of view, they are extremely safe. Well, modern buildings are extremely safe. We can design them extremely safely. Traditionally, we have designed on the basis that in a major earthquake, they will suffer controlled damage and protect the occupants. But we can do better, and this building is an example of one that not only has protected the occupants, but has also been able to be rapidly reoccupied and brought back into service.
Buildings like this are very important. If you look at the capital value of the land and that sort of stuff, we actually have to build. We have to build tall. We've got to build bigger buildings, substantial buildings like this, which can actually resist severe earthquakes. And buildings of this scale, we can actually do foundations that actually mitigate liquefaction as well. So if we were to invest more money into buildings of this sort of nature, this sort of scale, if we had another event of similar scale, we're going to have more stock left over rather than all the damage we've got now.
However, this was not the case when the city plan was released last week. The plan focused on a light rail system, a sustainable city and low-rise buildings, an idea that has upset some local business owners.
So just a quick overview of what we really have, and that is, I think, a safe, sustainable, green, high-tech, low-rise city in a garden, a place for people. So it's a low-rise city that we're looking for, and I just want to talk a little bit more about that. But what we wanted to show was how buildings should relate, in our view, as a result of the submissions that have come in and the ideas that have come in to the cathedral. So we've shown in the central city area there 3 major heights. The first one is the central city core, the highest area in the city, and we're saying that that actually should be around 6 stories, and there we're putting in a 7th story as well, which would be in effect a bonus level for good design, good green design and good urban design as well. And we've got an urban design panel. Every building that goes into the city will be required to go past this design panel so that we can ensure that we get the highest possible outcomes.
And with the Christchurch Cathedral suffering serious damage in February and again in June, it was almost completely destroyed. And Christchurch's other major cathedral has also had a lot of work done to it in an attempt to save it. The Catholic Cathedral has been taken apart carefully, with its dome removed to be preserved, and an army robot was also sent inside the building to check out damage.
We've got plans for the future. We've got to look at all these bits and pieces, but we want to really get inside the nave, which is the centrepiece of the cathedral, and just see what structural damage is in there. No one's actually been inside there except for the drone that went in 2 weeks ago. So once we're inside the nave of the church, we can actually see exactly where we're heading.
Along with major buildings in the city, roads and underground sewage systems also took a huge hit, with some being irreparable. Many roads are just as bad as they were 6 months ago. In May, Mayor Bob Parker, Earthquake Recovery Minister Jerry Brownlee and Transport Minister Stephen Joyce announced an alliance signing with contractors which aims to get roads fixed quickly on a budget.
Sarah and the Christchurch City Council will take responsibility for that consenting, and so there'll be a shortened timeline that will be developed by the two agencies to make sure that we get proper consenting, so there's no things being left unconsidered, but it will be a faster process because we want life back to normal here as quickly as possible. When we say as quickly as possible, remember that we're talking hundreds of kilometres of roads, hundreds of kilometres of sewer, wastewater, etc. So we would think that to get right out into the outer suburbs that aren't quite so damaged could be up to 5 years. But you know, the sort of damage you see behind us, a key arterial road, we want that fixed as soon as possible, and this structure will allow that to happen.
Coming up after the break, more on the hard-hit suburbs of Christchurch.
After the quake, frustration was felt widely in the hard-hit eastern suburbs. Many wanted answers about their future and what was to happen with their land and homes.
This street, mate, no bastard seems to want to bloody know anybody down here. I mean, Jerry Brownlee and his merry men need to move their asses, take his finger from up his ass and bring his bloody merry men down here and just get everybody down here and talk to the residents around this bloody area. John Key and his bloody merry men, Brownlee and his merry men all need to come down here. Don't hide behind the bloody TV cameras, don't hide behind the papers, come and talk to the bloody people down here.
It's just bad. Nothing seems to really happen, and it's the uncertainty that's eating people away. Where are we going? Where are we going to be in 3 months? Where are we going to be in 6 months? Is it going to be the same? Hope not. Be some angry people out there.
The reasons everyone here just wants to know what's going on, what's happening. No one's telling us anything about what's happening. It's just a shambles, and we just want to know. We're not worried about the payouts. We want to know what's happening. Are the houses going to get taken away? Are we allowed to rebuild? Just anything to find out. You know, we've had it. We've had enough. Everyone around here's had enough. You can see this is the 4th time we've been like this, and it's very frustrating here. It's hard. It's very hard. You know, the houses are all falling down. They're cold and they're damp, and it's just very hard.
Basically, I'd just like to be sort of told what's happening with our land and whether our houses are going to be fixed or whether we're going to have to move. The liquefaction's pretty bad around this area, so houses are sinking, and power luckily is back on, but we've still got no water, so it's sort of making life just a wee bit difficult at the moment.
An answer finally came at the end of June with the government's offer to purchase red zone homes and land.
So we are going to offer those people the opportunity to sell their properties to the government at the rating valuation. That is option A. You can cash up and go fairly quickly. Option B is that you could decide that the arrangements you have with your insurer will mean that you could buy a section somewhere else and have a new house built for you. And that option is available too. People will be able to sell the land to the Crown. In all cases, whatever the component of sale is, the Crown would assume the insurance and EQC obligations that come on that property.
So over the past 9 months, Canterbury has been shaken by a series of major earthquakes and aftershocks, which have severely damaged land, buildings, homes and infrastructure. They've also left residents in a state of stress and uncertainty. Since the first earthquake struck in September last year, the government has been working to provide certainty for residents about what their future holds. We recognise that many people have their life savings tied up in their homes. Each subsequent quake has made an already large and complex challenge more difficult as the extent and the amount of land damage has increased. To put the sheer size of these events into perspective, Treasury has estimated the combined cost of the first 2 Canterbury earthquakes at around $15 to $20 billion. This is enormous by international comparison. For example, Treasury estimates are about 8% of New Zealand's GDP, while damage from the Kobe earthquake in Japan was around about 2% of Japan's GDP. Hurricane Katrina was around about 1% of US GDP, and even the latest Japanese earthquake and resultant tsunami was estimated at about 3 to 5% of Japan's GDP.
And the Waimakariri district, which was described by local Labour MP Clayton Cosgrove as being in a holding pattern after work in the area was put on hold, got their announcement last week. 940 houses were red zoned in the Waimakariri district, and there are now concerns both in Christchurch City and the Kaipoi area that there's not enough land to rebuild on.
Today's announcement is about giving people an opportunity to move forward more quickly, but also recognising the difficulty of remediation in these areas. The long period of time that people have had to put up with disruption has been, I know, difficult for people, but was somewhat unavoidable. When you're talking about such large areas, I think it was appropriate that we did look to try and remediate land in the first instance, but that has clearly now become much more difficult.
All these houses were in areas that were severely land damaged after the September earthquake and have received repeated damage since in February and in June. It's in some ways it provides a lot of clarity for the people who are in either now in red or green zones. It's I don't see it as a good day for Kaipoi in the sense that Kaipoi has been suffering since September, and it's all part of a scene which is very disruptive for the Kaipoi community. So we've got a situation where you've got an accumulation of disrupted lives right across a significant part of this town.
EQC hubs have opened and meetings are now being held for those living in the residential red zones.
So it's going to take time, and people have got some questions we can't answer yet, and we have to give them the answers as quickly as we can. Also, people also have 9 months to think about this offer once they've got it, so they have actually got a reasonable period of time, and we need to make sure we've got good support there for them. There are lots of questions, and some of the questions are hard, some of them are unique, but some of them are common. We need to try and make sure people have actually got support so they can actually get answers to their questions as quickly as possible.
Residents have been advised to seek legal advice by the government for what has been described by Minister Brownlee as the largest land purchase ever. Residents now have 9 months to decide what to do. An inquest into the final 9 unidentified victims of the quake, who all died in the CTV building, including CTV staff members Matty Beaumont, Sean Lucas and Valeri Volnov, was undertaken. This was followed by another inquest into the deaths of all 116 victims of the CTV building collapse. However, this was postponed due to the June aftershocks. It will resume next week.
Because of the issues which have been raised as being matters of interest, such as, of course, why the building collapsed, the issue of why was it deemed safe, that is a matter which is being considered by the Royal Commission directly, and it's appropriate for there to be no double up of investigation or inquiry.
They were actually pulling out people relatively quickly, one after the other, so it's not as if they were actually taking a breath, recording things as we would meticulously do in a scene examination. The focus was on actually getting people out of that building as quickly as they could, also considering their own safety as they went about that business.
Some of the families of quake victims say they've been let down by the government. Many say Prime Minister John Key has backed out of a promise he made to the families, saying the government would support them completely. The families want funding for legal representation during the inquest, but the government has refused.
We have huge sympathy for these families. They've lost their loved ones in the earthquake. It's not a question of cash. At the end of the day, the government's put billions and billions of dollars into Christchurch. It's just that that process isn't typically one where you have those representations.
Well, I think it's important that the families are reassured that the government does want a good result out of this, that there's nothing to be hidden, and that we want to know everything that we can about why those buildings collapsed. Where there's been loss of life, it's in everyone's interest to know exactly what happened. Of course, families want that information, and we do too. Well, firstly, this is a commission of inquiry. It's an inquisitorial body. The reason it's being set up is because of the very concerns that the families have. We want to know why did those buildings collapse, and we want to know if there were any particular responsibilities that should have been exercised that may have prevented this tragedy occurring. We're doing all that against the backdrop of it being a very significant earthquake. but no stone is left unturned. So the family's interests are very much represented as the core of the inquiry.
That's CTV News, 6 months on. I'm Rob Cope-Williams.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.